Thank you so much for joining me today. I see Cubase and Peter online already, and I appreciate you guys being here because I know I don't usually do this late in the day or on Tuesdays. The focus of today's stream is going to be about something very closely related to what has been keeping me busy the last couple of weeks, which was a lot of remixing opportunities. And I really did a deep dive. And so I wanted to share what I've learned because I really consider myself very experienced with Cubase, but I made some discoveries. And usually if I'm making discoveries about Cubase, then they probably are not well covered. And actually these topics were not covered in any YouTube videos that I found. And the main topic here is, the functional purpose of this is to get audio to work nicely with your grid in Cubase in the way that we're used to, say, MIDI being very easy to manipulate in terms of tempos and timing. But specifically, it's a feature called beat definition markers. And this was really a discovery for me. So other people may have heard of it. Some people may even know about it. But essentially the idea is to get your audio to map to the grid. And this is very closely tied in with a feature called musical mode. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the caveats there because I think that unfortunately there's two ways in which Steinberg refers to musical mode, and it's not all that intuitive which is which. So along my trusty list of bullets over here, this would be helpful if you've got freely recorded music, stuff that was either played not with a click or was just a live recording, something like that. Maybe you are running a band and you did a live recording at a gig or something like that, and you've got your multi-track and you want to cut it up like it's on a grid, which is the way to go. But you could also use this with remixing. That's what taught me about this. The last week or so, one of the reasons I've been offline for a while was just had a wonderful opportunity to really work on some remixing, and that was challenging me to do, basically amp up my remixing workflow. And that's perfect here because remixing, especially with stems where you maybe break out the drums from the synth pads, from the vocals, from the guitars, that sort of thing, they're all there in your project, but they're not on a grid. You don't know what tempo they're in. And you could go in and you could do that with warp markers and warping the grid with the familiar warp tools. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But the problem with that workflow is it's very time consuming when you've got lots of stems because you have to go in and you have to warp each individual audio file. And it's just a little cumbersome. So this is much faster. Musical mode is really something worth talking a little bit more about because in musical mode, you have this idea of musical mode for tracks, and that is there's a little button usually on Cubase, and let me actually I'll bring that up here. So we will quite often see, let's see, if it's not showing up on this, I think because I just started a blank project. Let me see, where did that window go? Oh, there it is. It's right in front of me. So if you take, should be in here, hidden controls. No, I don't see it there. Yeah, switch time base between musical mode and so on and so forth. So I'm not seeing that over here. Oh, yes, there it is, that little musical mode. So when you switch this little button, switch time base between musical and linear mode, that is not what I'm talking about here. That is a track level musical mode or linear bass, and that's so that if you change the tempo, stuff on that track will move. But this is actually musical mode for an event. So in this case, this audio event that I have selected here, this has its own musical mode, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Now, as my graphic for this promised, we're not using Hitpoints and we're not using warp markers. Those are very well advertised features, and there's a load of stuff on the internet training people and tutoring people about how Hitpoints work and how warp markers work. They're extremely handy tools, but like I said, when you're working in large bulk with audio files, those are cumbersome and more time consuming than this approach. So let's just listen to this demo very quickly and it'll demonstrate what I'm after. So I'm just going to play this back and you'll hear that this is playing in time. Now, if I change the tempo, I'm going to change the tempo, down to 100. It's still perfectly on time, even though this is audio. As you can see, my only MIDI track here is muted. Okay, so how does this work? Well, I think it's easiest if I just demo it. So I'm going to get rid of these two tracks here and go back to the original file, which is actually this MIDI track. So this is just something I played in. Just imagine that you just record something off the top of your head. You don't know what tempo it's in, and you don't want to have to dial up a tempo. Or as I also said, maybe you recorded a live gig or something like that, okay? So I played this with some sense of tempo myself, so it does follow a tempo, but I don't know what that tempo is, and it's time consuming and kind of a waste of time really to go around figuring that out. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to kick out an audio track because I want to burn this in. For some reason the feature to render in place was very slow, so I'm just going to go ahead and you can now in Cubase 14, I believe, you can go ahead and just route that into this audio track, and then you can hit record. Oops, got to hit the record on the right one. So we're getting an audio representation of the MIDI, right? Again, there's no tempo right now. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just mute that original MIDI track. Now up here, I've got an audio track, which is actually, if we were to solo that, you'll hear, this was just something I imported from Media Bay. Hey, Rich, thanks very much for joining me again. So I've got this little audio track here, which I'm just going to use this as a sort of secondary support for demonstrating how tight the rhythm gets. But the main thing we want to focus on is I've bounced this to audio. It's a quick way for me to have made an audio file, but you really could start with anything. If you put in your guitar, you record a drummer, maybe you've got stems, again, that you've separated for a remix. Generally, this approach is going to work way better with something that has strong transients, which is why I chose this sort of transient, percussive sound. So let's just listen to what this sounds like a little bit. Very percussive. Now we could go in here and we could create hit points, and we could go through a whole bunch of machinations to somehow conform that. We could also do it with warp markers. We could go in here and we could warp the grid, or we could go into the audio file itself and we could, grab warp markers and we could drag them around. But there is a better way, and this is the way. So I'm going to come up here to the project menu, and I'm going to, with that audio selected, you see take one is what it's called. It's selected here in this tempo detection panel window. I'm going to analyze it. And what it does basically is it creates a tempo track down here. So it's just basically created a tempo track that attempts to figure out what the tempo is. And as you can see, each of these points is going to have, oops, I don't want to add my own points. Each one of these points has its own tempo. You can see the tempo listed right there. And you can also, if you're in the warp mode, you can actually see the tempos in little yellow numbers along the top. So you can see it's fluctuating the tempo a little bit, right? But the idea is that now, if we take the audio that I bounced out, which is a perfect representation of this MIDI, and we were to play a metronome along with it, the metronome now keeps perfect time. And I can go ahead, I guess that click is actually pretty loud. So it's done a really good job of determining this tempo. Now, the fact that we have a tempo track lined up here means that the grid is all lined up with these beats. And we can see down here how well those have actually been lined up. There's one that's a little off here. I think this should really be on the upbeat of 2, on the and of 2, and it's not, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. But it's much better than it was. Okay, so if we were to listen to this with the drums, still a little off. So what we're going to do now is we've got the grid laid out thanks to our tempo track, which we got to by going to the project menu to tempo track and then tempo detection, which brings up that window that you saw earlier. I don't want to do it again because I don't want to undo the work. Okay, so now we've got this perfect grid. What we want to do is we want to actually embed, and this is the feature that I really didn't understand before. We're going to actually embed this tempo grid in this audio file. And this is an option that's in one of the menus. And in the sample editor down here, you're going to actually see there's no markers right now, but there will be. There will be. So let's just double click on this, and so in our inspector we get the sample editor sections, and the thing we want to pay attention to here is the definition or beat definition. If we click manually adjust, we can see that there's one marker right here, okay, but there's no other markers. I guess there's another one right over here. Okay, now once I go and I select audio and I go down to advanced and I say set definition from tempo, it's going to give me the option of, do I want to do this on the project level? I'm sorry, I realized that you're not seeing my desktop. Let me go back and just go through that a little bit again. You can see that there's a couple of markers down here. We've got this definition set up here in the inspector. And I'm going to go up to the audio menu, down to advanced, set definition from tempo, and this window comes up where you can choose to either do it project level or audio files. If you choose right definition of audio files, it's going to actually embed this information permanently in the audio file, meaning that if you load it into another Cubase project, it's going to remember this tempo map for this audio. So it's like burning in a tempo grid. It's like burning in these lines, these vertical lines of the grid into the audio. It's really, really helpful, but I'm just going to do it on the project level. For our demonstration purposes here, it really doesn't matter. And as you can see, we have one clip selected, but if we were working on something with stems, we could select any number of audio files and burn this tempo into all of them at the same time, which is where it's such a time saver, especially working on remixes. So when I hit OK, you're going to see more markers show up down here. And now you can see there's a marker basically on every bar. And you can manipulate these markers. I'm not going to get into them because they are a little heady. As you can see, they actually have 3 colors. And depending on which part you grab and drag, you get a different function. But for right now, what you need to know is that this information here about how many bars it is and what the tempo is has been burned into this audio file. And you'll also notice that musical mode is on, these 2 little icons up here. When you're looking at the audio file in the left inspector, you can see musical mode is checked right there. And also if you were to look in the media pool, you would also be able to see that musical mode is checked right here as well. So there are a number of places where you can check off musical mode, and they're all basically doing exactly the same thing. So now what happens is I can actually turn off tempo, the tempo track, and this is still going to play in time no matter what tempo I have. If I were to bump that tempo up to, let's say, 150. If I were to bump it down to 60. Very, very slow, right? So one of the things so what this has achieved is that your audio file now can match whatever tempo you have in the project. And this process of using the set definition from tempo feature allows you to apply that to multiple audio files, which is really, really, really helpful. And now basically you can just imagine you've got a bunch of raw recordings, even an orchestral take, right, where maybe they didn't play to a click, and you've got 17 instruments, you've got them all loaded in, they all play fine together, but they're not on a grid, and you want to chop them up and arrange them in some different kind of remix format. This is the way you do it. You select them all. First, you do a detect tempo on something that's highly rhythmic. Hopefully, there's maybe a string ostinato or something like that that's got transients. Once you get the tempo track written and the grid is synced, everything's playing with a click, then you select all your audio files, set definition from tempo, and then you can disable the tempo track and you can set the tempo to whatever so that it's not fluctuating. It's one tempo the whole time and it just locks right in. It's really, really, really fantastic. Okay, so there's one thing I wanted to demonstrate last, which is that you can mix this with other features like warp markers. So right now I've got this transient here really should be on the upbeat of 2, on the and of 2. So in that case, I wouldn't use beat definitions to fix that. I wouldn't want to change any of the beat definitions, but I would go ahead and come over here to, audio warp, and I would say free warp, and then I would grab that and I would just drag that over there like so. And now, let me bump up the tempo quite a bit. You know, here's another one that's a little, I mean, it's darn close, but we could budge that over a little bit. You know, budge this over just a hair like that if I wanted it on the and. So you can actually mix these features. You can use the beat definition markers and the set definition from tempo in conjunction with warp markers in this case. You could also use it with hit points, but hit points and warp markers and these beat definitions are totally independent features. And the beat definition, as far as I can see, is only accessible through that set definition from tempo. Okay, so that is that's basically it. Let me look at the comments here, see if there's anything I missed. So yeah, that's right, Peter. You can also set the musical mode in the info bar in this area. And I think, yeah, I'm not sure, but you are right. You could do, oh yes, there it is, right up there. So that's a good, you can set it in the left-hand inspector, in the pool, or up there in the info bar. Yeah, so, you know, hopefully, Rich, your question about the quarter bar is answered by the fact that you can use a combination of the warp markers and the beat definitions. The beat definitions, if you save them into the actual audio file in that dialog that we saw earlier, it'll actually burn that into the audio file so that if you were to drag this, you would open this audio file in a completely different Cubase project. Cubase would interpret that correctly and it would immediately lock it on the grid if it was enabled with musical mode. As soon as I turn off musical mode in definition, you can see that the audio goes off the grid again. And so it is important that you have musical mode, but what musical mode is really reading or interpreting are these beat definition markers. It's not interpreting hit points. It's not interpreting warp markers. Those are used for maybe quantizing audio if you wanted to quantize things. And as you can see, when you're actually in the audio or when you're in the sample editor and you're in the audio warp rather than the definition, you do see that there have been warp markers. The yellow markers have been created basically to match the beat definitions. So there's sort of a symbiotic relationship there, but this is by far the quickest way to do that. Okay, so I think that is, oh, yes, I understand now what you're asking about, Rich, which is this time signature here. That is the nuttiest thing. When you do this project tempo track and you go to tempo detection, for reasons I have not been able to isolate, it'll create this 1/4 time signature, which is truly absurd. But you know, you just change it to 4/4, and it's same difference. It really doesn't seem to matter what that is in terms of using the tempo detection to your advantage in this workflow. So hopefully that that helps. Yes, Cubase, this workflow speeds things up dramatically. And I would encourage you, go and find, like, you know, something you've got that's multi-track that you know is not on a grid, something that's pre-recorded. As long as there is a single track in there that's percussive enough to be used to do the tempo detection and create that tempo track, then you can get started with this process. And it's amazing. I mean, it's really amazing to me how easy it is once I got this workflow down. And, you know, it's one of those things that I kind of, it stymies me that this isn't surfaced more, because, I mean, I love Cubase. There's a lot of people out there, I talked to them about Cubase, and they just kind of threw their hands up years ago because Cubase was, you know, they deemed it too complicated or something like that. It is a complicated software package, but I mean, this feature is, from my perspective, just it's a game changer for anybody doing remixing. I've got a lot of Ableton experience, but given the limitations of Ableton as an actual DAW versus Cubase, to be able to do this stuff in Cubase would probably appeal to an awful lot of Ableton users. Anyway, I'll leave it there before I make enemies online. You don't want to go talking smack about Ableton Live. Anyway, test it out. I highly recommend it. If you have questions, please do post in the comments. And I will be back on Thursday. A brief note for you guys, because I know you come very frequently to watch the live streams, which I really appreciate. Just schedule changes are such that I'm going to be doing Tuesdays and Thursdays, at least for the foreseeable future. I'm probably going to be doing Tuesdays this time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, and 11 a.m. on Thursdays. So I hope you guys can still make it. That's just going to be the schedule that I can maintain with my foreseeable schedule coming up. And so I hope that's not a problem. But as usual, suggest any topics you want me to cover in the comments as well. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time. All right, bye for now.